Hello noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. Today we're going to talk about all the items of clothing worn by a Roman legionary. So let's get to it. Oh, and by the way, what are you doing in my fridge? No wonder I've been looking for you all day. Okay, so we all know that Roman soldiers were wearing their lorica, we all know they were using their scutum, but what about all the rest of the clothing? What were they wearing underneath? The first element of clothing that we should be talking about is the subligaculum. Subligaculum is basically Roman underwear. We're talking about loincloth that they would wrap, and it was used from both women and men. After the subligaculum, we have got the tunic. Now, we've got two kinds of tunics, particularly in imperial times, the Romans would wear two kinds of tunics. The first one would be the subucula, the second one would be the tunica exterior. Now, the subucula would be the first tunic that they would be wearing, and materials and fabric could vary depending. The most common ones would be either linen or, for the winter, they would be wearing wool. But you also had, again, in imperial times, you also had the possibility to purchase cotton tunics and silk tunics, coming respectively from India and from China because of commerce. Now, of course, these would be very, very expensive, and only wealthy Romans would wear them. So here is an example of me wearing my subucula made of cotton. And here again, we've got an example of me wearing the tunica exterior made of wool on top of the first subucula. Now, here is a fun fact for you. The Roman Emperor Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus Augustus was very sensitive to the cold and sickly. So it has been reported by writers, Roman writers, that he would be wearing 4 subucula, one on top of the other. Can you imagine that? Now, if you want to be a fashionable Roman, then on top of your second tunic, the tunica exterior, you should be wearing your fascia ventralis or fascia ventralis. What this is basically a sash, but it had multiple purposes. The first one, as I said, it's fashion. It also helps you because, again, if you want to be fashionable, you should have the tunic reach just above your kneecap in the front and go a little bit further down on the back. The fascia or fascia also had the purpose of protecting your stomach, for example, from the pressure of military belts, but ultimately it was also used as a pocket where you could put everyday items. We now move to footwear, and of course we've got the famous caligae. Now, caligae are interesting. First of all, they are not sandals, they are military boots. The Romans also had sandals, but they were different from these, and they only used them in indoor and very informal situations, or even for dinner. But this were used by the military. Now, caligae are interesting because, first of all, they're made of leather, and one exceptional feature of these is the fact that they drain very quickly. So they would be using them, for example, when they would be crossing rivers, and their feet would get dry very quickly. Another interesting element of caligae is the studs, the iron studs that they've got on their soles. Of course, these had the function of protecting the sole, so if you had to walk on, for example, rocks or stones, then you wouldn't have a direct contact to the sole, and so it would increase durability. But they also had other functions. For example, they would give you a firmer grip to the soil, and ultimately you could use them to kick the enemy, and that would hurt. Another question that I'm often asked by my students is, did the Romans actually wear socks? The answer to that is yes, they did, and they were called udones, but they weren't that common. For what we know is that they were used in those countries, in those provinces that were quite cold, for example, Britannia, as we read from the tablets of Vindolanda, where we read a letter written from a mother of one of the soldiers who was sending some socks to her son who was serving in the legion, because it was very cold up there. Now, although the tablets of Indolanda are the most famous example of sock, where they talk about of proof of socks using by Roman legionaries, it's not the only one, as we have other mentions, for example, of a Praetorian guard who was using socks that were fashionable because they were made of two contrasting colors and they were open at the toe. Now, as we move forward with the clothing of a legionary, we move to the actual subarmalis or thoracomachus, which are two different elements that provide padding for the soldier for his armor. I have already talked about subarmalis quite a lot in my channel. You can find a video about that. But subarmalis could be made of either linen or leather. The difference with a thoracomachus is that most likely a thoracomachus would be longer and it would be thicker. Subarmalis and thoracomachus would provide padding and ease the burden of the armor, particularly on the shoulders. Now, as we move to the armor, the kind of armor that I have, considering that it's a imperial set, it's a lorica segmentata, although about this armor I have to say that one thing we know for sure is that the Romans did not call it segmentata. We don't know how the Romans called it, but definitely it was not the word segmentata, because although it's Latin, it was created by Victorians to classify this armor. A possible actual Roman name would be lorica laminata. On top of my lorica segmentata, we can see my military belt or cingulum. Now, a cingulum was a very essential piece of kit for the Roman soldier. Not really for protection though, as it doesn't offer actual protection from blows. A cingulum has other functions, but first of all, it's the symbol of the soldier, as if the soldier was not wearing his armor, for example in a dinner or wherever it would be, he would still be wearing the cingulum on top of his tunic, as that would show that he's part of the military. Another very important function of a cingulum was to ease the burden of the armor, because you would wear it very tight on your waist so that the part of the weight of the armor would be supported by your hips. Now, this would mostly work on lorica hamata, so male armor, but it could also be made to work on lorica segmentata if it was really, really well fitted to your body. Ultimately, another important thing, when you wear your cingulum, you should wear it on top of your gladius. Consider that the gladius will be on your right, because you can't have it on the left because you've got the scutum there, and so it would be a hindrance. You wouldn't be able to unsheath it, to draw the sword. The gladius is on the right, but if you don't have the cingulum on top of it, when you try and draw it with your right hand, the scabbard will come with it. So the cingulum also has the function to keep the scabbard of the gladius in place so that you can actually get ready for battle very quickly, without having to move the shield in order to make sure that you have always complete, thorough protection. Now, socks were not the only way the Romans were protecting their feet from the cold. They also used foot wraps, which were made mostly of animal skin, sometimes rabbit skin, and they would just wrap them around the feet, bare feet, some other times directly on socks to get double layer protection, and then the caliga would keep them in place. Ultimately, we've got the helmet. Now, in my case, this is a Gallic type H. There are several types, of course. What I like about this helmet is first of all, the cheek plates. As you can see, they are movable. So why are they movable? Of course, you need to fasten them. And the Roman soldier would also wear a scarf so that you wouldn't have any problem of chafing because of the lacing of the helmet. And also to protect you from soiling and chafing from the metal armor on your neck. But the cheek plates would be movable because when you are marching in friendly territory, you would just fold them and you would not wear the helmet, but you would hang it on your bosom. Now this, let me tell you, makes it a lot easier to march, because when you have your helmet on, if it's a very hot day like the one it was today when I went out to march, it gets really hot and you start sweating. So this is much more comfortable. Another variation when you're not in enemy territory and you're marching is that you wouldn't carry your shield, but you would put it in its cover, scutisque tegimenta, which was a leather cover for waterproofing your shield, and you would wear it on the back. Basically, you would carry it like a rucksack or a backpack. Now, instead, when you were in enemy territory and you needed to be ready for combat, then you would simply carry your shield on your left, you would carry your pilum, and you would wear your helmet, so that you would be ready for combat at any time. Alright then, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye. Walete.